So welcome to this training webinar. The scope of this webinar is to cover how to scale an analog input into an S7300, how to do the wiring for the analog input, and then to do a comparison between Simatic Manager, which is the classic environment for the S7300, and then TIA, which is also used for the S7300. Okay, so what I have open here on the screen is the TIA program, and I also have a scaling block. And then also what I have is a panel which is in the middle of being completed. It's not fully completed yet, but it does have an analog input, as you can see on with my mouse here. Okay, so first off, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover the wiring. So in terms of this card here, this only has one input on it. You can get cards that have 8 and so on. And the analog input that I'm using it's set up for 4 to 20 milliamps. So it's important that from an E&I perspective, that the card is actually configured correctly, both in terms of the hardware. There is a switch effectively on it where you can put it in to measure voltage or to measure current. So that's very, very important. So what I have here is a transmitter. Sorry, I'll just put down this camera here. I have a transmitter here, and then I also have a PT100 here also wired up to that transmitter. Okay, so with the transmitter, it's set to have a measurement between minus 50 and then plus 150. It comes from a temperature control unit. So in terms of the card, the wiring is fairly straightforward. What we have in terms of this black and the red wire here in the second and third channels, that's going directly to the transmitter, and then we just have power input into the card, and then we've got a lot of empty space here where in other cards you actually have the analog inputs. So again, this card is only used for one. Just in terms of just this particular PLC here, this is an Ethernet card. That's how the communications are done with it. Then we have an S7300 with some digital I/O and then just a power supply. Okay, so if we'll push this guy that to the side. So we'll get into the actual into the program itself now. So in TIA, when you go into device configuration, it's important obviously that you set up your PLC to be the same as the actual physical hardware you have there. We'll go into the actual card. So in the card, it's important that you note down what is the I/O address. And then in terms of when you actually go into the channel, that you set it to be as per how you've set it from the hardware side, right? So there's actually like a physical switch where you can put down again 0 to 10 volts, 0 to 5 volts, PT100 directly, or a 4 to 20 milliamp signal as we actually have in this case here. So that's very important just to note that and to remember it. So in terms of actually scaling, we have an example here in ladder of a scale block. So in terms of Simatic Manager, there is a specific scaling block that other automation engineers would use called an FC105. So in this case here, this is just literally just called a scale block. Okay, so what goes into it? What goes into it is the actual I/O itself. And then you put in the different limits. So you put in the high limit and the low limit. Again, 150 minus 50. In terms of what you get out, then it's important that you actually put a real value, right? So in this case, what we have is we have something called a data block, which we use just in the same way as Simatic Manager for anyone who has experience. We actually set up our variables there to actually have everything held. And there's something very, very important that I'm going to point out, in particular for anyone who's been involved in the migration of Simatic Manager and TAA. When you go into the actual hardware, so I'll just click down here. So when you go into the hardware, you'll see that there's an address, an input, essentially where you see it's PIW. Sorry, I need to go down to something called the symbol table. So you'll see PIW 272. Okay, so if you remember that PIW 272, and then if we go back to Simatic Manager, the symbol table equivalent is effectively this PLC tag tag table. And when you're actually putting in the tags, you'll see this concept of IW272. This can cause enormous confusion. It's one of those slight differences. So when you are inside your scaling point, what you have to do put down is IW, then the address, in this case 272 colon P, and then that is the equivalent. That is something that has caused enormous issues in the migration between Simatic Manager and TIA. So it's just very, very important to note that. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to go live. I'm actually online to the PLC. So in TIA, I can see that this guy is 21 degrees. What I'm going to do is just put in this camera here. Okay, so you can see the value in real time. And here I'm just going to hold this in my hands, and what we're seeing then is the actual value is going up. So you can see that there's data block AN1 val, and just by the temperature, in my hand, I think our temperatures goes up to kind of in the mid 30s. So basically the room temperature here is about 21 degrees. Okay, so that guy is is live in itself. Okay, so the next thing for me to do then is just to go into Simatic Manager and just point out a number of just differences that you'll see. So just to kind of wrap it up very quickly. So inside Simatic Manager, when you go into your hardware, again, it's just very much the same. When you click into it, the addresses, etc., and what you put in. Here, what you'll see is the measuring type 2D-MU. And in terms of when you go into TIA, the other aspect is that when you're actually trying to get it, you'll see this 2 WMT. It can be slightly confusing, but just again, it's important to note those slight differences. Okay, so in terms of, sorry, just one moment there now. So in terms of the setup that is being shown, basically the transmitter is something that is, it's just something that we've used in an example in this case. So the request for this video was just to do a demo of an analog input. There's many videos that you can find where there's a focus on, say, just how to do it in the software, but the wiring is very, very important. Again, the setting has to be correct on the physical card itself. Then in the software, it's extremely important that you select the correct the correct input type. And just one last thing, just before we finish up, usually on PLCs you'll see different kinds of green lights which indicate exactly where things are at. So with these actual analog cards, what's most important is that you see no light on it. If there is an issue here, or if the wiring goes wrong, you can actually damage the card where it can't be reused, or if it's configured incorrectly, you'll see a red light beside this SF. It's hard to see it in the camera here, but sorry, I wasn't actually showing the camera up. It's hard to see SF on this camera here. So usually the lights are green on everything else. So that's kind of just a good indication if you've got things wired incorrectly. Okay, so look, there'll be other videos that we'll do. There's been requests on, say, counters and so on. So what I'll do is try to get that together in the next few days, and I'll be in touch and take the questions now. Thank you.